Well, good morning and welcome to this, the last of the I Am series of sayings for our sermon series. And next week we'll move on into our new sermon series that starts next week. But today we look at I Am the Vine. And this comes from the 15th chapter of the Gospel of John. The first and the fifth verses are where you find the statement of I am the vine, but I want to read the first 10 verses because they put it into a context. And I'm reading from the Common English Bible here this morning. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine keeper. He removes any of my branches that don't produce fruit, and he trims any branch that produces fruit so that it will produce even more fruit. You are already trimmed because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. A branch can't produce fruit by itself, but must remain in the vine. Likewise, you can't produce fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. But without me, you can't do anything. If you don't remain in me, you will be like a branch that is thrown out and dries up. Those branches are gathered up and thrown into a fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified when you produce much fruit, and in this way prove that you are my disciples. As the Father loved me, I too have loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. Now, as I said last week, this whole section is set in the time of preparing his disciples for his departure. This is the third time that Jesus has been in Jerusalem for the Passover meal. In the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those writers only have Jesus in Jerusalem one time for the Passover meal, and that would be the time that he was arrested and then taken to the cross. But in John's Gospel, this is the third reference that Jesus has been there in Jerusalem. I want to begin this morning by asking you, you all that are gathered with me, and you all that are home watching, you can think about this. What does it mean to you for Jesus to be the vine and for us to be the branches? What kind of image does that bring to your mind? What kind of relationship comes out of that?
Well, the branches are nothing without the vine. They fall off and die. And they cling very closely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in my yard, I have an apple tree, and if I don't prune it back each year, or maybe every other year, it doesn't produce half the apples that it does when I prune it back. I have to take off all the water sprouts, the ones that go straight up, the ones that can't hold the fruit because the apples get so big. They're black twig, and they get about this big. And cutting grass this summer, I kept hitting my head and knocking apples off because I was trying to drive under the tree, and the limbs are hanging down. And also, I like to raise tomatoes. Well, my vines are about 10 feet tall now through the cages, and my next door neighbor, she told me that they had to pull theirs up because theirs had all rotted on the vines. Well, in fruit, you have to keep picking the right fruit for the vine to keep producing. If you don't take the right fruit off of it, the vine gets the idea, hey, I'm not needed anymore, so I'm going to dry up.
Yeah.
And that is what happened to their tomatoes. I'm still getting tomatoes about baseball size because mine are still growing, blooming, and producing fruit because I try to keep the fruit picked every other day at least and get at least a half a bushel or so of tomatoes every time I pick.
Do you prune the the branches off the vine of the tomato plant that aren't going anyplace?
I haven't yet, because I had 38 plants, so I really didn't need to. I'm ready for them to pass away too, and Susan is too.
Well,
So,
one
But
of,
if we were to take the suckers off, put them in a glass of water, we could produce new plants, and I would have continual tomatoes out of new plants all year round.
one of my uncles was convinced, and he did this to his tomatoes, and he always had a bumper crop, that as the vine grew, if a branch came off, if it did not proceed on to produce a flower, he would cut them off. He only left the ones on there that had the buds on them. And I've never done that in my own tomato plants.
If I'll have them spread on the ground, I do that natural because I'm walking on them. But mine are in cages, so that's the reason they get 8 to 10 feet tall. And I still have, the last time I picked tomatoes, I was picking them head high, because that's half the vine I've gone to pick tomatoes, because they're still going, and they droop over to my cages coming back to the ground again.
Yeah.
But they are still blooming
So if they were actually going up,
through the cage.
you can't reach them.
I know, I have picked, take the, stepladder to have to pick that and cucumbers, because I used to have a 12-foot fence up to run cucumber vines. And I had to take a stepladder out to pick those, because they put straight on up to the sky.
The image of the vine is another of those images. All of these I am sayings relate back to the Old Testament. And the vine is another one. It follows that trend. And it was so prevalent in the society, are ingrained in them, the relationship of the vine to their relationship with God, that on the front of the temple, there was this golden vine that was molded into the temple up the front, and branched out and had clusters, golden clusters of grapes that were added to that. And William Barclay says that it was a matter of honor to be able to amass enough gold that you could provide that gold for a cluster of grapes. And that made me think about capital campaigns. You see this image of a tree with the leaves on it, and as people donate money, they get their name put onto the leaf, indicating that they've contributed. And so that, I think there's a connection back here in the way that this was done in funding the Old Testament. It says that, Barclay says that even if you could only contribute enough for one grape, a gold to put one grape in the cluster, that was an honor there. But you find the references in Isaiah, the 5th chapter, the vineyard of the Lord is the house of Israel. Jeremiah 2:21, yet I planted you a choice vine. And Hosea 10, first verse, Israel is a luxuriant vine. There's a difference in this image of the vine compared to the images from the other I am sayings. It may not jump out at you, but the difference there is that in the other I am sayings, when we looked at what Jesus was taking on himself, he was taking an attribute of God, a connection that the Old Testament people had with God, and assuming that for himself. Here, these references to the vine in the Old Testament are a reference to Israel, not to God. God is the vineyard dresser, the keeper of the vineyard. But the vineyard itself is the nation Israel, the people, God's people. And there's another attribute that you have to read more than just these single verses that I lifted up to you to see. But these references from the Old Testament to Israel being the vine, the vineyard, are almost always have a slight negative connotation to them, in that the wild vine, the one that's gone astray, the vineyard that's not producing fruit, those go along with these verses that I lifted up. And so here we have Jesus saying that I am the vine, and that we are the branches. So I started out by asking you what that meant to you. But I think when you look at it this way, Jesus is taking something negative and he's moving it into a positive realm, that there's life to be had here. The vine doesn't have to deteriorate. I will nurture this vine. I will do whatever, this is Jesus saying, that I will do whatever it takes to make this vine have life and have it abundantly. Your part is simply to connect yourself to the vine. But there's an expectation that comes along with that. And that's why I read the other verses that went along with that. What's that expectation that comes along with that?
Produce fruit.
Produce fruit. There's no place there for you if you're not producing fruit. Jesus alludes to the care of the vine in the Gospel of John here, in that these some people call them suckers, the branches that branch off and they don't produce any fruit, they're cut off. And the vine itself is pruned so that it stays a particular size, that the vine does not overextend itself from what the roots will support and growth there. So there's always this pruning that keeps it going along the way. And this wood that is pruned off of a vine. Roger, you've been involved with the wood ministry here at church. If somebody came to you with an armload of vine that they cut up into firewood lengths, what would you do with it?
Give it to you, because you got that door furnace, you can burn anything. But I wouldn't take it to somebody that burns it in the house, because it would have no value.
That's right. It's like putting newspaper to start a fire. It flares up and then it's gone. The practice of the vineyards would be that they would accumulate these cuttings and they would get a big pile of it and they'd have a big old bonfire, but it wouldn't last very long. But it served a secondary purpose. In the pruning of the vine, they would cut off any diseased branches also. And in burning it, they would destroy any organism that was there so it wouldn't affect any other of the vines in the vineyard on that in burning it. And Jesus very graphically here in this passage tells us that if we don't produce fruit, the shears are coming, going to get cut off. You're going to be put into that pile that's going to be burned. The vine itself is going to be cared for so that it has the root structure to support whatever's there, so that there is good fruit, fruit that you can use that is a result of that.
So we need to work on our root structure. If we want to grow, we need to work on our root structure. Oh, that's application, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a place that we need to go as we think about this.
Could be called growth by reduction too. Get rid of the stuff that doesn't produce because it takes up too much energy to try to keep it living if you're not getting any benefit from it. So get rid of that so that the your energy goes to something that's really gonna produce and be beneficial.
Yeah.
Just like the military, if you didn't keep a good road system to supply your army, you never win very many battles far away from your home base because you don't have any support to keep the army surviving very distant. That's the reason Roman army was doing so good. They produced roads and built roads to wherever they were going to keep the army supplied.
I can't remember the name of the church or the pastor, but this was out in the area around Chicago that this took place. There was a church in the conference that was going to be closed, and this pastor went to the bishop and asked before they closed it, would she or he, I can't remember which, appoint him to that church so that he could, he wasn't ready to give up on it.
Mhm.
And he says the first year that he was there, that he grew the church from a little over 100 people down to less than 50. I think there was some pruning going on. I also think that when he says that he grew it down to that number, that it was going down to the number that the support system of the church would support. The church turned around and grew and is now one of the largest Methodist churches around, and they in turn have conducted workshops to help other people learn how to support what the support system is that you need to support the growth in your church in that. And I'm sorry that I didn't look that up, but I'll get that information and bring it back
Wasn't
next
Rick
week.
Warren, was
No,
it?
Rick Warren's in California.
Okay.
He's at Saddleback. Christiansburg, that's not right. I want to say the pastor's name was Lyle, but I'm not sure about that.
I have heard that churches must often grow by subtraction first because you're getting rid of those who are negative. If you've got members who are negative, let them find somewhere where they can be positive. Negativism in the church can hurt more than anything else.
I have at times in my pastoral career encouraged a couple individuals that they might be better off someplace else. I have a friend that he said that he had one particular member of his congregation that was always pulling his chain and threatening to move her membership, and one day she lit into him and he had said he had had enough. She said she was going to move her membership to the Presbyterian church down the street. So he went home, wrote a transfer letter, took it down to the Presbyterian pastor and called her and told her her membership had been transferred. I'm not bold enough to do that. But I have encouraged people that they might be happier someplace else, that in their beliefs and the way that they fit into a congregation. Well, this concludes the I Am sayings. And I hope that they have been beneficial for you, that you might look at these in a different way, that you're seeing how they connect to you and your lives along the way. Next week, as I said, we will be starting a new series. We'll be looking at mentors, how people have been, some of the leaders in our scriptures, how they have been mentored by other people. And of course, that begs the question of looking at our own lives, of how we've been mentored and who those mentors were. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to having you back next week.